bottom line of today's presentation is that resume getting you interviews? Is it doing its job? Are you targeting your resume to the job posting before you click submit? If not, this session today will help you understand why targeting your resume is so very important and help you with how to do it. We will discuss resume formatting, applicant tracking software, accomplishment statements, and we'll touch briefly on cover letters as well. So let's talk briefly about employment applications. Here's a question for the chat box, a real quick answer. Why do they ask for both an application and a resume? Why are employers asking for this? Is it just to torture us? Go ahead and type your theories out in the chat box real quick. The biggest difference that I can draw for you is a form is created by the employer. That's one, the application. And the other, the resume, is a marketing document created by you to market you. So always read through an application's instructions and as much of the application as possible to see what it entails. Give yourself plenty of time. An average job application may take up around an hour to complete. Plus, you'll need a few hours to target your resume to the job posting and another half an hour to draft a cover letter. Always read the small print. Including your signature confirms the accuracy and truth of the information you provide on an application. Fill out everything. Use maybe that not applicable if necessary, but please don't leave anything blank. Remember the power of first impressions. The application is one. If the employer can't count on you to carefully and completely fill out an application, why would they assume that you'd carefully and completely do your work? Always keep good records. Each employer is likely to require you to create at least a password on their online application system. So write it down, put it in a spreadsheet, however you do it, just keep good records. This is one of the most common and agonizing struggles we see in our career lab when we're open. Remember, the application is just one of the first impressions that you'll leave with the employer. All right, you'll notice the recurring theme in my message to you today is target every resume every time. Include only relevant information. And after we complete our workshop today, we want you to understand the key resume basics and basic resume sections. We want you to know the importance of targeting your resume and understand that your formatting choices are many and it's up to you, and the importance of using the right one for your advantages, your personal strategy. Know what an accomplishment statement is and how it is used to sell your skills. And finally, we'll talk briefly about the advantages of sending a cover letter and the basic content you'll include. So there is no exact formula to resume writing. If there was, you wouldn't need us. Resume writing is both an art and a science. CareerForce staff offer best practices and personalized strategy advice. So keep this in mind, please, as you digest our suggestions and observations about your resume. The most important thing is that you are comfortable with your resume so that you can confidently sell your skills and your background when you get to the interview. The more you read and research, you are bound to find conflicting advice out there about job search. When this happens, first ask yourself about the context of what you're reading. Is the advice directed to a certain specific industry of job seekers or job seekers with a certain background? And second, ask, is this advice what's going to be right for me? Does it make sense for my personal job search strategy? And the only real test for your resume is whether or not it's generating an interview. All right, resumes, where do you start? You want to take your cues from the employer's job posting. So let's look at a couple of examples of job postings. How do you figure out what's relevant to the employer here? Well, you really study their job posting. The one in front of you right now is a very short posting. In order to target your resume to the job posting, you must study it, analyze, and plan your attack. So you'll need to analyze that job posting to form a strategy of your own. There's a few ways to start this. You could use a free word cloud. You might just do an internet search for free word cloud, and you can copy and paste the job posting text into it, and it will show you what the most common words are, the most important words. You could also use the website jobscan.co for free scans of 5 times per month per email address. Or you can do it the old-fashioned way, and I'll show you that manual method that I sometimes use. So in order to target your resume to the job posting, I begin studying to plan my attack. So here you can see that I've first identified all the action words, meaning all the verbs. What powerful, impactful verbs are they using? Because those verbs will likely need to be in your resume as your action words that start your accomplishment statements, which we'll talk about more in length a little bit later. The second, after you've identified all those action words, then you want to look for key phrases and words that are very important to this particular employer in this particular role. So you'll notice here that now I've taken their small paragraph from the posting and I've created my own checklist. Do understand that my checklist is fluid, as I may not squeeze all of the keywords from one of their sentences into just one of my accomplishment statements. Do what works for you. You know, if it's a notebook or if it's a spreadsheet, or however you do it, if it's a good old-fashioned highlighter and you draw your own checkboxes, whatever you do, that's what's right for you. Okay, so my third step is to look for patterns. And for today's purposes, I know that I've started with this short example, but most job postings are long enough to reveal more telling patterns. So on the next slide, I've included information from yet another job posting. So you can see here, I've already completed the steps of 1, identifying all the action words and verbs that are in green, and then I've used my digital highlighter to highlight keywords and phrases. So then here you can see this is where I've identified patterns. The root words are counted and priorities emerge for me. In this case, my recommendation to the job seeker was to ensure that those 3 highest important words showed up prominently on the top third or the top half of her resume. So that's just one way of taking apart a resume and really studying and analyzing it so that I know what it is I need to do to target the resume. All right, Miss Robin, have we got any questions?
We do indeed. Thank you very much. Say, just a couple of notes here. We spent the first 15 minutes here just getting used to the system, and I wanted to just remind everybody. I had said send questions to everyone. And apparently I missed a memo. The WebEx changed things a little bit. The option you want to select is all panelists. So if you've got questions for Marty, send it to all panelists. And then just a reminder again that Marty will be sending out follow-up materials tomorrow. So I know there's a couple of people who missed a couple of things. You will get this information, and also it's being recorded. So this will be available as well if you want to review it. So on to our actual question. And Marty just disappeared. She's clearing up her cube.
I just realized that there's a whole puddle that I'm standing in, folks.
Oh, jeez. Oh, man, this is a Monday. Anyway, okay, so while Marnie is doing a little damage control, I'm going to start with the answer to this, and then we're going to send it off to her. So the question was, should you have more than one resume? And I am a big believer, and have been for many years, of having slightly different resumes for every single job you go through. You want to target it. You want to make sure that the resume is absolutely telling people that you are the perfect match for their job, because they don't have time to put all the pieces together themselves. You want to make it really easy for them. Now, one little thing that I'll throw in, and then I'm gonna pitch it to Marnie and let her continue on, is this will also, if you're applying for a lot of jobs, which I did about 10 years ago, you're going to want to set up a kind of a filing system, so that you know at any given time, I sent this resume to this organization, I sent this resume to that organization, and definitely keep the job descriptions as well. So you want to file all of that. Okay, Marnie, I'm going to let you add your 2 cents, and then we'll go on from there.
Sounds good. Yes, one of the things that you'll notice that I updated in our slide and speaker notes this morning was that there are a couple of ways to use a free spreadsheet online, and that's, I think, a great way to keep track of all of your applications, you know, what you did to follow up, who the contact was, how long ago you submitted, what their deadline was if they have one, you know, when you followed up, if it's a week or a month later, because a lot of these hiring practices really tend to spread out, even though when the employers talk to us, when they call us or email us, they are desperate for you out there. Still, the hiring process takes a long time because it's quite an investment. And so it's super important to remember what you sent, who you sent it to, and when. And so, like I said, you'll get these speaker notes, and in there is a little bit about using Google Drive and Google Sheets, about using your Microsoft Outlook, MSN Live, Hotmail, whichever one of those emails you might have, and using Excel Online, free with that email account, to keep yourself organized. And if you have any questions on that, please contact your career force location, and staff can help you learn how to use those tools so that you are organized and efficient in your job search.
Marnie, I'm going to interrupt you just a sec because another question came in and it's relevant. So we've talked about really targeting your resume, but what happens if you're working for recruiters or headhunters, or, and this actually even kind of delves into LinkedIn, what happens when you can't really target it? What do you suggest there?
Yes, this can sometimes be really hard. I always likened it to like the old Classify ad that was maybe, you know, bookkeeper needed, call Bob, and there's the phone number, and you have no idea what bookkeeper means to Bob, if it means certified accountant or if it means somebody who can use QuickBooks. We have a strategy for that as well. You know, ONET Online is one of my favorite tools for this. If you don't have a great posting to go from, then I would work with you on a strategy and probably use something from ONET. ONET is an occupational encyclopedia. And so on there, we would look up the occupation profile, or maybe profiles. Sometimes it's more than one because jobs can be, you know, a coordinator of certain things, and they can include separate occupations in one position sometimes. But based on what we learned there, that's probably how I would have you target your resume in that kind of situation. Any other ideas, Robin?
I'm sorry, I'm answering other questions, so I think you got it. Go for it.
All right, let's move along here. Okay, so when you're creating a resume, this is not a complete history. It's only a preview. So I encourage everybody to have a complete employment history. I have one. It's based off a really long application that I did once that I saved in my Google Docs. And so then when I'm filling out an application, it's a matter of copying and pasting into the current application that I'm doing. And then as I get a new job, it's important to, of course, put in all the pertinent information into that employment history. But what we're talking about today is a resume, which is a marketing document, like I said before. So think of it as a preview like a movie trailer. It's just enough to get the employer interested and wanting to know more about you. It should be a quick and easy read. There will be clear sections, and the accomplishment statements will not be written in full sentences. It's not an essay. It's a marketing document. So remember, it's a fluid document, and its purpose is to get you an interview. So if it's not working, if it's not doing its job and getting you those interviews, change it. So in the chat box, take a guess at this question. How many seconds or minutes on average does an employer spend reviewing your resume for the first time? Getting 20, 1, 7, 15, 5, less than 20, maybe 5, 30 tops. Okay, 1 minute. The answer is that it's roughly only 10 to 15 seconds. If you look at the second hand on your old analog clock, that's not much time at all. If you try to read for just 10 seconds and you use a timer, you'll be surprised at how little you can really. This and wanting to know more so that they'll ask you for that interview. So
I'm going to interrupt you,
let's
Marty,
talk
just for a
about
second because
visual and kind of the test of holding it an arm away. Yeah, I see I'm cutting in and out.
Yep, you are cutting in and out. So we've had this problem before. So what I'm going to suggest here, guys, is I'm going to jump in really, really quickly and answer a couple of questions that have come in while Marty's dealing with the audio situation that's happening. A couple of people have asked about applications, and what happens if you're dealing with an application and they won't let you go on unless you answer a specific question a certain way. Somebody's asking about arbitration, somebody's asking about college, and there's not an option and that kind of thing. One thing that I would say is one option that you do have is before you even apply for anybody, check sites out like glassdoor.com, places that will give you possibly will give you some information about the interview process and the application process. Research that company and find out if you're really concerned about what should I choose here, or if I don't choose this, is this sending the wrong message? What I would strongly consider is either, again, researching it or even calling them up, okay? So that you get that additional information about what are they going to want to see. Is it okay if you kind of take the best guesstimate? And if you're unsure, there's nothing wrong with, hang on one sec, I'm gonna make sure that Marty is.
Hello,
Okay.
can you hear
There we
me?
go. Yes, we can. Good. All right.
Awesome.
I was babbling, but I was basically done, guys. So what I was saying is, if there's any questions regarding specific questions about the application, what to put on, what not to put on, do your research, go to Glassdoor and other sites where people talk about the interview process, and B, connect with HR if you absolutely need to. Okay, Marty's back. I'm going to mute myself.
Thanks, Robin. Okay, so somebody out there said the video is really hard to read. understand, I was just about to explain what you're looking at here. So let me tell you, this image comes from the ladders.com, and it is showing the heat from a recruiter's eyeballs as they moved over two different resumes. On the left are dense chunks of text and very wide margins. So you can see there's a few spots here on the resume where they've kind of stopped, they've looked and floated over. Over here in this right margin, I always kind of think to myself, like, maybe this poor recruiter was thinking, like, what am I going to make for dinner tonight? And they just kind of stalled for a second with their eyeballs, thinking about that to themselves. But if you look over on the right, you can see that there are clear and separate sections on this one, and things are kind of more spaced out. It's just not as dense as this one is right down the middle. And what you can't see a lot of the time is that this bottom section is education. And often recruiters know that the education, whether this person has a certain degree or certificate or diploma, is like a deal breaker for the employer that they're recruiting for. So that's probably why they dwelt on this section for a while. It just is to show you the visual impact, again, kind of holding that at an arm's length and thinking, is this going to be easy to skim in 10 to 17 seconds? Because what we're doing with these resumes, our marketing documents, are not only getting through the applicant tracking system, which we'll talk about more here in a few minutes, but hopefully, ultimately, getting in the hands of a real, live human and having those eyes read over our actual resume. So we're kind of going for two different audiences here. Okay, so you want to know that most application materials will be scanned by software during the first review before reaching a human eye. That's that applicant tracking software. So be aware that any sort of fancy font can be misread by scanning software used by many organizations to screen applicants' documents initially. Applicant Tracking Software, or ATS, can sometimes only read text. So graphics, text boxes, pictures, underlines, italicized things, that may not be your best strategy for the audience of this software on your marketing document. As far as content, make sure that you speak their language. So you're, again, studying the job posting and then mimicking their language. That's why you're looking for their action words, their keywords, their key phrases. And if your previous employer, maybe, for example, terms the people you serve as customers, but the employer in their job posting uses the term guests, maybe you change that term on your resume from customers to guests. If they maybe list a strong candidate will be detail-oriented as one of their qualifications, consider changing your wording. Maybe you've got something like high attention to detail to detail-oriented, just like they have in their job posting, meaning you'll speak their language. Do some research, look around the application page, maybe for an ATS brand name, and then you could do an internet search for that ATS and see what you can find as far as tips on submitting a resume and application through that particular brand of ATS. That's just one kind of strategy tip that we have for you. That is called crowdsourcing, right? We learn things from other people who have experienced something before us. So resumes should always be honest because any inaccurate information could cost you your job later. You want to focus on skills and things that you've achieved or accomplished rather than just a history of the tasks that you performed. Employers are most interested in the results. So focus your resume on a particular job. So even if you are just posting a resume to minnesotaworks.net, you are sure to be asked for that objective. What is it that you want? And you'll notice that on minnesotaworks.net, you're allowed to put up 5 different resumes. So you could target 5 different types of occupations. If you try to include all of your experience and skills, you make it much harder for the employer to imagine you in their specific position that they've advertised in the job posting. So for example here, what we're talking about is don't confuse them by putting forklift experience on a resume for a job at a restaurant. The two just aren't related. Unless it's relevant to the job posting, you're best to leave it off the resume. Now, targeting your resume to a particular job helps the employer see how qualified you are for their specific role, and it increases the likelihood that you'll be called for an interview. So remember, to job seekers, the resume is a selling tool. To employers, it's a screening or elimination tool. Sorry. Okay, so use keywords to stand out in applicant tracking systems that identify and eliminate interviewed candidates based on keywords, or more accurately, the lack thereof. Okay, so choose a resume format that best presents your skills relative to the job description that you're targeting. So the top third of your page is key. Make sure the reader immediately sees your intention. That might be just the professional title that you're targeting. It might be an objective. It might be a profile or a summary statement. Whatever you call it, your intention needs to be known right away at that top third. It must grab the employer's attention during the top half of the page. You do need to have some white space, so avoid using paragraphs, maybe use bullets, some indents. Margins can be up to a minimum of a ½ inch, but no more than an inch wide. And for easiest readability, use size 10 to about 12-point font. There's no need to waste valuable space at the bottom of your resume with the line, references available upon request. That line is no longer trendy in resume fashion, and it's implied that you will provide references if you are asked. So unless the references are requested, do not send them in right away. Start with the basics, the application, the targeted letter, targeted resume, unless the advertisement calls for something additional. If references are requested, place them on a separate sheet of paper with the same name and contact block that you have used on your cover letter and resume. So remember, you want to target every resume every time, no matter which format you choose. Things can be formatted a variety of different ways, and there's no test on this. We just want to make sure that you know you'll need to choose the format that tells your story best based on your individual background. So no matter the format, target the job that you're applying for each time. Okay, so let's talk about each of these general formats. Again, you will see this in the slide and speaker notes information that we send out to you after the workshop. The chronological, what it does for you is that it highlights recent employment while kind of de-emphasizing jobs that you held years ago. It's best for people with very consistent employment history and no gaps in employment. May not be the best format for individuals who have job gaps, or for recent graduates, or for people who are changing careers. In the chronological, your recent work history should be consistent with the career goal. Again, that intention of what it is you want with this resume. Now, generally speaking, you'll use about 10 to 15 years of work history or your last 3 jobs. Now, again, I'll emphasize that's generally speaking. That's not a hard and fast rule. Okay, the skills resume or the functional resume. This focuses on skills and accomplishments. It's recommended for new job seekers. So maybe somebody who has just graduated, just gotten a certificate, a degree, or diploma, and really wants to focus on what they can do, what they've done, and not necessarily the work history. So a combination of both chronological and functional resume is the combination. So easiest to target a job posting, I think, specific to each individual occupation and posting that the employer puts out. You know, like Robin said, you're going to change this resume. You're not going to start from scratch each time. And so when you are keeping those great records and you're saving these different renditions of your resume, you may only need to move it through a few things around, you know, just as far as arrangement of what comes first on the page, and just the text or the content like we mentioned before, making sure that you hit all the keywords and phrases. So this kind of format combination, generally speaking, again, is probably the most commonly used one. It allows you to both focus on the top 2/3 of the document on those accomplishments that are relevant to your target, and it condenses the work history into more of a concise list. All right, so now let's go into some basic sections or basic parts. You start with the name block. That's your contact info. And you've got your full name, no nicknames, but if you do go by a shortened version, feel free to do kind of as we show here on this slide. So many agree that removing your street address is a good idea. Not only is it a security concern for some folks, but it also can allow you to be geographically profiled. And no doubt it will be required on the application, so the employer is going to get the information anyway. As a best practice, we encourage job seekers to pick just one phone number to make it simple for the prospective employer when they go to contact you. Make certain that the number that you use is the one that you'll answer most of the time. And for most people, this will be a cell. There is no need to label it as such. A phone number's use is implied by its format. A label is just added clutter that kind of distracts from the essential information. Now, be aware of your outgoing voicemail message. Keep it professional. No backtones, please. No music, please. No Bible verses, etc. As far as your email address goes, please keep it professional and avoid any numbers that appear to be the year of birth or graduation or something like that. So any of those 2-digit or 4 digits that are looking like 1978, right? Or just 78. All right, and if you are active and your profile is complete and up to date on LinkedIn or WorkHands, go ahead and put your profile link on your resume contact information block, because then the employer can learn more about you if they so choose. All right, next, again, I'm going to encourage you, you have to put your intention, and it may be titled objective, profile, or summary, but it just needs to be an indication of the target of your resume. It should be very specific to the job that you're applying for, and you'll want to avoid any like wordy or long run-on statements that start with generic introductions like seeking a challenging position with a growing company. And really, who does that serve? The challenging, the growing, that's about me. And what you really want to do when you're filling this out is letting them know what you're offering that employer. So it should be about them. You know, you're offering creativity with 10 plus years of experience as an engineer in this example. You want to remove any instances of I, me, or my from your resume. Avoid me-oriented words and phrases in general on the resume. Instead, offer that value that the employer will gain by hiring you. For example, you could say, seeking part-time position in the floral industry, offering expertise in merchandise trimming and preparation at high standards and a record of always operating with the best interests of the company in mind. That really focuses on the employer. And that's what you want to do with that intention portion of the resume. Let them know what you're offering. All right. So here we're talking about the experience. If you do a whole experience section, you want to list your most recent employment first and then work backwards in time. You could include your volunteer experience. Just make sure that you indicate that properly. And your volunteer and your paid experience can either be separated or it could be combined. Just the same, you'll want to list your education with the most recent and then work backwards in time. And if you have any college whatsoever, even if you didn't achieve some degree or something, you still don't need to list high school. So I'll say that again. If you have any college, you don't need to put down any high school on the resume. Of course, that's likely going to be required in the application, so know that the employer is getting that information anyway. Now, education dates are optional. You need to know that education dates can suggest your age and how current your academic knowledge is. So take that into account and consider leaving those dates off the resume. Plus, you can vet that there'll be detailed information like that required in the application. So if the targeted position is unrelated to the subject that you studied, you can leave off that subject and just put that you got a certificate or a diploma or a degree. You can list training and continuing education that is relevant to the job you are seeking also in this type of section. Other resume sections might be organizations or memberships or affiliations that you had that are, again, related to the target job. You can include any awards or recognitions that you've received. You can list hobbies only if they are related to the target job. So if you like reading mysteries, that's great. But unless you are applying to the bookstore or the library, that's probably not relevant information that's necessary on your resume. And always be cautious of including any affiliations that could be polarizing for the reader. So, for example, anything political or religious. All right, any questions, Robin?
Huge. We've got some great questions coming in, guys, and we'll take a look. We're mindful of the time, so if we do not get to everyone's question, we will connect up with you. Okay, so what do I choose first? Okay, just a nuts and bolts question to start us off. How do you list it on your resume if an employer changes the name of the company you worked at previously?
You could go a few ways on this. You could put something in parentheses behind it. You could just go with the most recent. That's really ultimately up to you, but contact your local career force staff and kind of come up with a strategy. Use them as your sounding board.
Should you list a job where you were fired?
If it's part of your work history, you absolutely should if it's relevant to the job posting.
If you went to college in the 70s and did not get a degree, how do you list this?
I would say a certain number of college credits. If you cannot find that, I would try to come up with some sort of measurement. 2 semesters completed, so many hours completed, so many quarters completed. I would, again, strategize with your local career force staff, to come up with a way to put that on there so it gives you some added value.
Okay, I'm going to throw in my favorite question here. I'm sorry, guys. I'm playing favorites here, but I do like this question just because I've never heard it before, and I think it's an interesting topic to think about. So the question is, does removing inapplicable experience, so we were talking about targeting the resume, Marty. This is during the section where you were targeting. So does removing inapplicable experience assume the employer has listed all requirements for the role? For instance, who knows what, quote, other duties as assigned might encompass? I've actually got a couple of opinions on this, but I want to hear what you think, Marnie.
Absolutely, yeah. I would start out with, we're only good as the information we're given, right? So we do our research about the employer, we learn as much as we can about the role, and we take their job posting and we use it as the basis of, okay, you're saying you want this, here's what I have that matches this, and that's what I'm going to, leverage as my information to get in for an interview, to talk more about what this position truly entails. Because you're right, all of us, or more and more of us, have had experiences where we go in and the job posting has changed. The role, the vision that they have for this role has changed. And it's just like this slap in the face, but it happens. Employers are people too. And so they're writing job postings just like we're writing resumes, right? It's an art and a science. So Robin, I would love to hear your ideas for this, but I think that a lot of times people are nervous about lying by omission.
I think go ahead.
That's just not the case. Resume writing is a marketing tool, and you're using what you know based on the information that they gave you.
I think the other thing too, the idea of including information about your accomplishments and skills that may not immediately seem applicable to the role. This is one of those tricky things. You mentioned, for example, the example that is used in the question is other duties as assigned. Looking back on my current job, and I can now look at it as someone who's been in this job for 3 years, I can tell you that the other duties as assigned comprise literally 4% of my job. So to fill a resume with the skills that might be applicable for that part of my work, yeah, I can do it, but I would hate to think that my more applicable skills are going to be lost in a crowded resume with all of those inapplicable skills mentioned, if that makes any sense at all. It's kind of a gamble. Yeah, technically you're right. Throwing in a couple of things they hadn't asked for could put you over the top if they're like, oh yeah, and we want to do that in a couple of years. That's cool. Or it may confuse them because they're looking at the skills that they had listed as absolutely need to have. So this is one of these vague things that Marnie and I laugh about because we always end up kind of going back to the, please reach out to Career Force. What I would honestly suggest, the best way to figure out what to put in and what not to put in is to go through with a Career Force staff member with the job description in front of you, and then ask him or her, okay, so I want to add this to my resume. Do you think that's appropriate? And if so, where should I put it? I want to add this, and really, really discuss it with the specific job in front of you, because there's no way that we can give you any more specific advice on this without knowing the job specifically. Okay, right. Wonderful question.
Yes.
Robin was great, except she played favorites. You guys are all great. You guys are all great. Okay, so here's another one that pops up, and boy, Marnie, we haven't done this one for a long time, but it's popular, so I know a lot of people are going to be grateful that you asked this question. So they were with the company for 15 years. They had 6 different job titles. How do you list that?
Ooh, and we have a very specific document that we will be sending you that gives you a couple ideas on how to do this. You might list that employer and then put all of those jobs underneath it. You might be in a combination resume situation where you list it in that nice compact list. There are definitely different ways to show this in all of the formats. So not to worry. We will give you some, I think it's 2 different ideas of how to do that, how to list it on your resume. Yeah.
Do you?
Just to
Oh,
go ahead.
for it. Nope. Go for it. Go for it. Go for
I
it.
was just going to reiterate that there's no blanket answers for you here because it really is individualized advice that we want to provide you so that it's strategic for you and your job search and what you want. Go ahead, Robin.
I think actually this next question I was going to do it ties in brilliantly with the screen that's in front of me. So I'm going to throw this out, Marnie, and then you can kind of put it in as you're going along. This is about accomplishments, where somebody asks a great question because I bet a lot of people are wondering this. How do I figure out things like the percentage of the increase in production I was responsible for, or how much I raised sales? A lot of people hear this advice, they like the advice, but the reality is they've never thought about this before. And so in their previous job, they didn't write any of this stuff down. What do you suggest?
Oh, absolutely. And I think most of us do not go to a job every day and log each task that we do. So we don't have exact measurements, and that's fine. You might say, managed anywhere from 3 to 30 people, or you might say you did up to 25 of these a day, or you had fielded from 300 to 500 calls within any given day, or it might really range. And typically the way that we come up with these numbers is to talk with you. Okay, Susie Q, tell me about this job. Oh, okay, who did you serve or what did you make? And tell me about the line that you were working on, or tell me about the office. And so more information comes from that conversation, that give and take and exchange, where I can ask you questions that maybe you just weren't thinking about, and really pull the answers and the measurements out from you. And so it's really that give and take that we offer here at CareerForce. That is why we keep encouraging you to use this as a springboard as you are doing these workshops online. I think it's a great way to get started and get organized, but then use it as, okay, I've now listened to this hour-long presentation, and I'm going to find out where my nearest location is. I'm going to give them a call or an email and really get started talking with an individual about my job search and what strategy I might want to use. Okay. Let me get back to my speaker notes here. So ideally, you will seek out different action words to begin each accomplishment statement on your resume. You can use the employer's action words, letting them know that you speak their language, of course. And examples of action words can be found in long, long lists online. So if you don't have a great posting to go from, you can go again to ownitonline.org for ideas. They have long lists of tasks for each occupation, and that's where you find action words. Or you could just do an internet search for resume action words. And I've even done this for different occupations. Nurse action words, production line resume action words, and you get tons of ideas. All right, in the resume reviews that I do via email, I will often alphabetize a person's accomplishment statements. Say they come at me with 4 pages and it's just this really long resume, and if I alphabetize those accomplishment statements, I often find that I'm repeating action verbs. So I highlight those repeated action verbs, and I let this person know that redundancy can be very off-putting within resumes. It could be perceived as a sign of disorganization, or a lack of attention to detail, or a lack of a willingness to take that person's long employment history and bring it into a targeted piece for this individual targeted posting and employer. So sometimes those action words that are repeated mean that you could combine statements or you can combine sections. This is why a lot of people use combination resumes. So a number of other things you could do, and again, this will be in the speaker notes, is you could right-click on the repeated word, and you could check out the list of synonyms for ideas of what else to use. Or you could go out to thesaurus.com and put in your action word that's been repeated and get some other ideas for what to use. Or again, you could just do an internet search for resume action words for your occupation. Now, phrases like responsibilities included or responsible for do not add value to your resume, nor do they reveal your unique experience. And they can sound like they've been copied straight out of an internal job posting from your last employer. Again, this notates that you probably didn't want to spend enough time targeting your resume to this prospective employer. And that causes a first impression about you. So this is why we teach about accomplishment statements, AKA skill statements, impact statements, or power statements. They're carefully crafted accomplishment statements that are how you make yourself stand out from the other candidates by telling your own details of performing a certain task or skill. So let's give you an example here, and then I'm going to ask you to do a little activity. So when someone's assigned to our reception desk, one of the tasks, of course, is to answer the phones. And if you simply list that task as answered phones on a resume, it doesn't really give the employer very much to go on about this person's capabilities on the phone. My guess is that everybody out there today can also answer a phone, right? So to make this into an accomplishment statement, I need to add some details. I need that action word, answered. We can still use that, but answered and appropriately directed phone calls on a 6-line switchboard for 5 partner agencies and 40 to 50 staff. Now, if I just said answered phones, that's anybody, but this person could do this on a switchboard, and they could do it for different organizations at the same time and for a number of staff. So that tells the reader a little bit more about their capabilities. Now, for this next slide, please open a blank word processing document or grab a sheet of paper and a writing utensil. On the next slide, there will be 2 tasks listed for you. I want you to please prepare to rewrite, reword, and revise them into an accomplishment statement. And then I'd like you to share them in the chat box with us. As you work and you submit these into the chat, I want to review some accomplishment statement basics. Resume bullet points should be accomplishment statements, not just tasks. There'll be a combination of action word or words, some details, and then results that show your value doing that specific task. A laundry list of duties equates to unsubstantiated claims that do not sell you to the employer. So work on building statements that describe your unique experience performing that duty or exhibiting that skill, and strive to include some specific details. Now, on this task list here, we've given you two examples, kept inventory and called customers. And maybe some of you are saying, nope, I've never done that in my job. Have you done it in your personal life? Do you kind of keep an inventory of items in the kitchen? What you're going to use to cook for breakfast, lunch, and dinner? For just yourself or for a family? Do you keep that inventory of what toiletries you have, of what you have in the garage for your vehicles? Do you keep an inventory of stuff that the hockey team needs, or stuff that the knitting group needs, or stuff for your book club? Do you have to call vendors? Do you have to call companies that you pay your bills to? Have you called people before, and have you kept an inventory of things before? I bet you have. So give yourself kind of an idea of what you might do as far as an accomplishment statement. And I do recognize that we have 1 minute to 11 here, and we have about 6 slides left. So try adding quantifying things, and this will enhance each statement, making it more effective. So what kind of things did you use? Did you use software? Ask yourself how many, how often, roughly. Did you use certain equipment or certain software? Generally speaking, we would share some rewrites here and really talk about these, but this is basically an exercise to get you thinking about things. Writing and refining accomplishment statements to target a required list in a job posting is one of the most time-consuming tasks in resume building. However, you can take heart in knowing that all of the work that you're doing to build that effective targeted resume is really preparing you for the interview. In fact, all of your job search activities are building blocks to that interview and your next job. So know that you are doing meaningful work as you take the time to carefully construct powerful accomplishment statements one by one. Do your best to draft these using your job posting as a guide, and then send that drafted resume along with the targeted job posting in for a review. Now, I understand that it is 11:01, and so if you can stay with us, that would be wonderful. Again, now I just have 5 more slides, and we understand if you can't. There will be a recording of this class, so we will do our best to get it done here today. And if you can't stay with us, I am sorry about going over here. All right, so it only takes 1 error of spelling or grammar to take your resume out of a consideration pile. So if you are using more of a simple text program without spell check, always paste your final product into something like Google Docs or Microsoft Word or another software that runs a grammar and spelling check. If you don't have that, make sure that you send it to your local career force staff and they can put it through something like that for you and send it back. If your resume is not winning you interviews, have it reviewed. To locate your local email address for your resume review requests, you can go to careerforcemn.com/locations, like Robin just put in for everybody. Thank you. I'm going to skip that little question period there. We might be able to take some at the end, but I'm going to plow through our next few slides here. As mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, please give yourself plenty of time when you're planning to apply for a position. I'll reiterate that an average application may take you around an hour to complete. Plus, you'll need a few hours to target your resume, especially the first few resumes that you are doing in the job postings that you're targeting. After that, it likely will not take quite as long. And then maybe you'll need around a half an hour to draft a short cover letter. Although some say it's a formality or even obsolete, we teach that every resume needs to be accompanied by a cover letter. You can use the same name and contact block information as your resume. The key is to address the letter to a specific person whenever possible. Always try to find an individual's name to address the letter to. After exhausting all of your research angles to find that name, you can default to something like Dear Hiring Manager. Each cover letter should be targeted towards the job posting and should not repeat anything from your resume. Remember that unlike the resume, this cover letter gives you a chance to write in full sentences, so show off those skills. Avoid starting too many sentences with I or my, if possible. Remember that the entire letter is about you by you, so no need to reiterate that fact with these pronouns using, I think, I feel, I believe, things like that. And if you have a hard time with composing these things and you think, oh, there's too many I's or my's in here, again, send it off to your local career force staff and ask them if they can help you reword it a little bit. That is our job. It's something that we do every day, and I am proud to say that we are all very good at it. So, to be honest, cover letters may or may not be read. Unless you're familiar with the person reviewing the application submissions and know their personal preferences and habits, you have no idea. So just in case, do not repeat things from your resume. And cover letters must be short and to the point and easily skimmed, just like the resume. 3 paragraphs total is plenty, no more than 3 to 5 sentences each. And you want to indicate how you will follow up with the employer whenever possible. If you do, make sure to mark it on your calendar and make the effort. Following up and doing what you say you will do helps you to stand out. If you are asked to, indicate salary requirements in the form of a range that comes from your research of local competitive wages, not just a number grabbed out of the air. And again, if you're not sure how to find that range of the local competitive salary requirements, make sure to contact your local career force staff to help you with that. And finally, make sure that you proofread and edit your cover letter. You don't want any mistakes counting you out. All right, thank you, everybody. This is our last slide. Robin, anything?
Okay, guys, thanks very much. Wonderful questions. I decided that what I would say is reach out to your local career force location. Take a moment when you click off here to write down any of the questions that didn't get answered and reach out to us. This is hopefully the beginning of an ongoing discussion, an ongoing working with us. So don't feel like if it doesn't get answered right now, it's just never going to be answered. It will. Thank you, everybody. We're going to be sending out follow-up materials. As I said, this has been recorded, so it will be available for review as well. And we'll talk with you later. Thanks.
Yes, absolutely. Bye-bye.